We are together working and jumping through the book of Job. It is a slightly challenging book in the fact that it is rather thick. It's a long book. There's a lot to be said in it, and there's parts of it that tend to just lend itself to a little bit of poetry. So it makes us think a little bit. And that's not a bad thing at all. But this morning we're going to take a chunk out of the book. We're going to look at 4 chapters as Job responds to his friend Eliphaz. Usually when people come into trouble and there's some problem in their lives, friends and family gather around. There's nothing unusual about that. I remember reading in a Reader's Digest about a gentleman who had an incident and was sharing the story with his brother-in-law. He'd been out mowing his lawn. There was a bit of a slope on his lawn, and as he was coming down the slope with the lawnmower, he realized that the grass was moist, and the moisture caused his foot to slip, and his foot slid right underneath the lawnmower. He was telling the story to his brother-in-law, looking for some comfort and somebody to pat him on the head, and he was showing him how the blade had come and hit his boot and had never cut into his foot. It just stopped at his boot. And his brother-in-law said, "Well, you know what your problem is? Your blades aren't sharp enough." Like, who needs enemies? I mean, and that's what Job experiences. His friends gather around him, and they really have nothing to say. I'm sure this is a classic situation, and if you don't know of Job's situation, read the first 2 chapters of the book and how he's not only lost everything financially and his family, he's also lost his health to a degree that everybody thinks he's going to die. I haven't mentioned his friends. They come along in chapter 2. At the end of chapter 2, 3 friends heard of all that had happened to Job and what had come upon him. They came each from his own place. Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar. They made appointment together to come and to show him sympathy and to comfort him. They don't say a word for 7 days. They sit in silence while Job sits on the garbage heap, and they are expecting Job to die. Everybody is. Even Job is expecting himself to die. Chapter 3, remember, Job breaks the silence. We looked at this chapter last week, this dark, dark place that Job goes to. Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. And Job said, "Let the day perish on which I was born, and the night that said a man is conceived. Curse the day I was born. Remove that day from time." And Job wants to be eliminated from the human race by God doing an act of uncreating the day of his birth. So because Job has now spoken and broken the silence, the culture now allows that his friends can now speak. Nobody would speak unless the ill person spoke first, because you wouldn't want to offer something. So Eliphaz, the Temanite, begins to now respond at the beginning of chapter 4. And we assume by this, also culturally, but mildly irrelevant to us in the great scheme, but this would be the oldest person. Of the 3, perhaps even older than Job, we're not entirely sure. The text doesn't give us enough clues. We know he has gray hair and a beard from later on in the book. He would be the oldest because the oldest would speak first, because the oldest is always the wisest. And so Eliphaz now has his opportunity to respond to Job's plight. He is one of those ones who's gathered around, as the text told us, to add sympathy and comfort. So he begins to speak. By the way, this little text, which we'll try to work through quickly this morning, I will do my best to do so, I promise you that, but I got to say, this is the longest dialogue, the longest single dialogue in the entire Bible. Eliphaz is a long-winded man. Just a heads up on that. We're going to skip. We're not going to be reading every word. I'm just going to give you the gist of where he's going. Read it for yourself, and you'll see this man has a lot to say, and he really summarizes it can be summarized in a very short way. So he starts. "If one ventures a word with you, will you be impatient? Yet who can keep from speaking?" What he's asking is politely saying, is it okay if I speak? I mean, really, how can I not say something? "Behold, you've instructed many. You have strengthened the weak knees. Your words have upheld him who was stumbling. You have made him firm the feeble knees. You've helped other people. People have come to you for advice. You have had words, so how in the world would you think that you're going to get off the hook from hearing words? You know we have to speak to you. So he summarizes his entire dialogue in these little words. If you want to know sort of the boiled down version of what Eliphaz has to say, here it is. Remember, who that was innocent ever perished? Or where were the upright cut off? As I have seen, those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same. Have you ever seen anybody who's absolutely innocent who died? No, you haven't. Have you ever seen somebody who's done nothing wrong and they're suddenly taken from this world? No, Job, you haven't. Do you know why sickness comes on people? It's the law of consequences. He is saying in a sense that there's some mechanical system in the universe where if you do something wrong and you send that negative energy out into the universe, it's a guarantee that something will come back and land on you. Eastern mysticism calls this karma. It is simply a notion that still exists to this very day, and it was the very idea that Eliphaz had when he was describing Job's problem. Your problem is you reap what you sow. And it's so obvious, Job, if you would just be honest as you begin to see him explaining, that you have clearly done something wrong. I have seen those who plow iniquity and sow trouble. They reap iniquity and trouble. And what happens? God squishes them like a grape. By the breath of God they perish. By the blast of his anger they're consumed. You do something wrong, and God's going to get you. He uses this little illustration, this little vignette of a picture, poetically speaking. This cause and effect. The roar of the lion, the voice of the fierce lion. So the lion is alive and looking for prey. He's roaring and trying to scare animals out of the jungle and towards him. The teeth of the young lions are broken. It's a very strange sentence, by the way, with a verb as the last word. This sentence is almost incomprehensible, but at any rate, there it is. The teeth of the young lion are broken. That's the scene he set up. Here's a lion that's roaring for prey, but the lion has a problem. For whatever reason and whatever cause, we don't know. It's just a picture, but the lion's teeth are broken. He's been chewing rocks. I don't know. But it's a cause and effect. He's got no teeth, so he's roaring. So what happens? The strong lion perishes for lack of prey. With no teeth, you don't catch anything. And what happens? The cubs of the lioness are scattered. Your family leaves. It's a cause and effect. You've got this happens, this is going to happen. It's a guaranteed. Job, you're sick. Why are you sick? It's obvious. There's something wrong in your life. You've overstepped the bounds. God is responding to you. Job listens to Eliphaz at length before he even speaks to him. But Eliphaz clearly has a sense about him that he needs to underline. He needs to find some way to bolster his position, and he uses a spirituality. He uses a means of showing his own spirituality and his own in with God. He explains where he got this information from. He says to Job, "Now a word was brought to me stealthily. My ear received the whisper of it." Something mystical was going on. How do I know this, Job? I learned this from some mystical moment. Amidst the thoughts of visions from the night, I was in my bed sleeping. When deep sleep falls on men, dread came upon me, and trembling, which made all my bones shake. A spirit glided past my face. Wow, that's a little creepy. The hair on my flesh stood up. It stood still, but I could not discern its appearance. A form was before my eyes. There was silence. Then I heard a voice. Oh, the drama. And then he says, the voice speaks, "Can mortal man be right before God? Can a man be pure before his maker?" From verse 17 to verse 21, you get this picture of this revelation, so-called revelation that Eliphaz has. He spiritualizes this. I'm telling you this is true because God himself told me this. I have special inside revelation, special information. If you've never met somebody on this page just you haven't lived quite long enough. There are always people who know what your problem is and who will tell you that they've got the word from God for you. It's always interesting to me how it is that God has a word for me from somebody else, and God somehow couldn't speak to me himself. He had to get you to tell me what I need to hear. How is it that that works? I don't know. But Eliphaz is pulling the same stunt, if I can say that politely, that we still experience today. That he is using insider information, claiming to have a revelation from God. Here it is, verse 5, very plainly. Affliction does not come from the dust. Trouble does not sprout from the ground. But man is born to trouble as the sparks fly upward. Job, what's your problem? There's something wrong in your life. It's a law of cause and effect. There's a law of causality, but we know as readers this is not true. This is why the prologue in the book of Job at the beginning is so plain. This is why I tried to very politely make sure you remembered this and heard this over and over again. It sets the stage for everybody who's going to read the book of Job. When you get to Eliphaz, you know what he's saying is not 100% accurate. Because Job is blameless, upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. The reader knows at the outset, this is not the case with Job. There is no hidden sin in his life. This is not the law of causality. This is not karma, if I can use the word. This is not God being vindictive because you've hurt his feelings. That is not what's happening. The reader reads this and they know, Eliphaz, you're off base. What's interesting is how close Eliphaz can get to the truth without actually being accurate. Because isn't it true? Isn't there, in fact, a truth in Scripture that you reap what you sow? Don't we find that for ourselves in Galatians 6, for example, verses 7 and 8? Do not be deceived, God is not mocked. Whatever one sows, that will he also reap. For the one who sows to his own flesh will from the flesh reap corruption. Is that not what the Bible teaches? Yes, it is. Is that not what Eliphaz is saying? Sort of. Yes, it is. So what's the problem? How is it that Job can remain innocent when we know that the principle of you reap what you sow is right there in the Bible? In fact, we see examples of it. You might remember an Old Testament story. 2 Samuel 6. They're bringing the Ark of the Covenant. Don't want to get into this, but it's a fascinating text. The Ark of the Covenant represents the very presence of God. God had told them how to handle the Ark. It was to be covered. It was to not ever be seen. They were told to put poles, to bring it on their shoulders, to walk in on poles on their shoulders. And they decide to bring it in on a cart pulled by oxen. The oxen stumble, and the very presence of God represented in the ark begins to jostle itself off the cart. Do you know this story? Uzzah puts out his hand to steady the ark of God. And what happens? Cause and effect. You touch the ark, you die. Uzzah drops dead. This seems shocking in some ways to our ears. But this is exactly what God told them would happen. What happened, Numbers 4:15. When Aaron and his sons had finished covering the sanctuary and all the furnishings of the sanctuary, that includes the Ark of the Covenant, as the camp sets out, after that the sons of Kohath shall come to carry these. But they must not touch the holy things, lest they die. They're told this. Don't touch this, you will die. Uzzah touches it. Surprisingly enough, God wasn't kidding. He falls over dead. It's a cause and effect. Uzzah got what he should have expected. That is what Eliphaz is saying. It's a principle that God responds to wickedness. But is this always the case? We know it's not. Not only because of the case of Job, but also because, and I've already mentioned this to you weeks past, John 9, verses 1 and 2. As he passed, that's Jesus, he saw a blind man from birth. And his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned? This man or his parents that he was born blind? See, obviously, there is a law of causality in the universe. And if something bad has happened to you, if you've been born with an ailment, you have been born with sin in your life. But who sinned? This man or his parents? What is the answer, class? You know this. Jesus answered, it was not that this man sinned, nor his parents. Blindness is not a result of inherent sin. Yes, there are all kinds of maladies that we face because in the greater cosmos, sin has entered the created order. That is the reason for disorder and decay. It is the reason for death. It is the reason for disease. But it is not on an individual basis that we receive these things. And Eliphaz is sure that Job is experiencing this because of his own personal sin. This is where Eliphaz is half right. And this is where we need to be very careful with our own understanding of suffering. Yes, suffering can be a result of your own bad choices. You can reap what you sow. You do not delve into drugs or abuse of alcohol and then you lament that your body's broken down, that your brain is fried, that your liver's got issues. You can't possibly expect that there's not going to be a cause and an effect. You can't live a promiscuous life and then say, why did God give me an STD? Why would I ever have to experience this? You chose what you chose. But there's also cases where somebody innocently goes in to the hospital, receives a blood transfusion, comes out with a disease that they did not expect, nor did they deserve. Not a part of any cause and effect. It's a random happenstance. So both are true. Eliphaz is right, but it's not the whole picture. It's not 100% of the time. Yes, you reap what you sow. But Eliphaz, you can't apply this 100% of the time to every situation. Eliphaz continues with his advice. Don't you love this? As for me, in other words, if I were you, I would seek God. And to God would I commit my cause, who does great things and unsearchable, marvelous things without number. Is he right? Does God do great things and unsearchable, marvelous things? This is the twistedness of it. He's right. This is good theology. That's a description of God. He gives rain on the earth, sends water on the fields, sets on high those who are lowly, and those who mourn are lifted to safety. God does great things. Job, throw yourself, but the problem is, Job, it's you. The problem is you, and the reason you're sick is you. And you don't have enough faith, and you're not close enough to God, and you're not right with God, and there's something in your life, and the reason you're sick is you. And if you would just do what you have to do to figure out how to have your devotions every day, to pray a little harder, to do something to finally win God's favor, you would not be sick. I don't know if you've heard that kind of teaching before, but I certainly have. That the problem ultimately is you. Well, this is what Eliphaz is saying. Behold, blessed is the one whom God reproves. Therefore, despise not the discipline of the Almighty. For he wounds, but he binds up. He shatters, but his hands heal. You are being disciplined by God. Embrace it. Whereas we said 10 years ago, suck it up, buttercup. This is from God and you deserve it. So Job answered and said, oh, that my vexation could be weighed. All my calamity were laid in balances. Job has this poetic picture of a giant set of scales. Take all my problems and all my issues, and if you could weigh it, put it on this side of the scales. Now, on the other side, take all the sand of the sea and put it on the other side of the scale. My calamity, laid in the balances, would be heavier than the sand of the sea. That's what he's saying. If only you could know what I'm going through. Because not only now am I suffering physically and emotionally, but now I'm listening to you. That's what he's saying. Oh, that I might have my request from God, that God would fulfill my hope, that it would please God from chapter 3, his lament, to crush me. If God would crush me, then it would prove to you that he would answer my prayer, and he's hearing my prayer. If God would kill me, he would prove in doing so that you're wrong. Oh, that God would squish me right now. Then you would know you're wrong, because God would be listening to my prayer. Then he has this very poetic thing. I'm only pointing this out to you because this is the way the book of Job works. They borrow these images and ideas. It's poetry. Sometimes it's not always clear. The caravans, this is Job describing his friend Eliphaz. The caravans turn aside from their course. They go up into the waste and perish. He's talking about trade routes between Timnah and Sheba, and caravans would travel through this wasteland in hot days, and they would move from oasis to oasis, and they strategically knew what time of day to leave and how to arrive and how long they had before the sun would be whatever, and they had this whole system worked out. And they would survive the journey through the desert because they were nomads and they knew how to do this. The caravans of Timnah look, the travelers of Sheba hope. What are they hoping for? The oasis, water. They're ashamed because they were confident when they left. They were sure they knew where the water would be. They came here, they're disappointed. For you now have become nothing. You have become just like somebody who arrives to look for the oasis and finds out there's no water. So they turn aside from their course and they go up into the wasteland looking for water, and they die of thirst. Eliphaz, you are not giving me one drop of cool water. You are wasting my time and your time. Eliphaz, you are no comfort to me at all. Teach me, tell me. I'll be silent, I'll stop talking. Make me understand. How have I gone astray? How forceful are upright words? But what does reproof from you reprove? What are you saying that I don't already know? I know there's a law of cause and effect, that God, you reap what you sow. What does that have to do with me? Tell me what I've done wrong. Do you think that you can reprove words? And speech to a despairing, and the speech of a despairing man is wind? You're telling me my words and saying I'm innocent of foolishness? And I'm supposed to listen to you? You don't listen to me and I'm supposed to listen to you? There's a serious argument going on. You would even cast lots over the fatherless. This is just an insult. And bargain over your friend. You're no friend at all. What kind of a friend are you that come here and comfort me and tell me that I'm wrong? You would throw dice for somebody who needs help. You would bargain over your friend. You would throw your grandmother under the bus. But now, please look at me, for I will not lie to your face. Please turn. Turn now, he says in the next part. Do you see what's going on? Eliphaz, he won't even meet his eyes. And Job is saying, look at me when I'm talking to you. Please now, look at me. I will not lie to your face. Please turn. Let no injustice be done. Turn now. My vindication is at stake. Pay attention. Look at me when I'm talking to you. Is there any injustice on my tongue? Can my palate not discern the calamity? He is again declaring, I am innocent. Look, do you understand that sometimes calamity comes for no reasons? And sometimes there's no cause and effect? That's what Job is saying. Let's run through chapter 7. Has not man a hard service on earth? And are not his days like the days of a hired hand? Like a slave who longs for the shadow? Like a hired hand who looks for his wages? So I am allotted months of emptiness, and nights of misery are apportioned to me. Somebody asked me last week, how long is it that Job is suffering, and how long does this take place, over what period of time? The book itself is not full of information on that, except little hints like this. I am allotted months of emptiness. So this has not been years so far. Whatever period of time has passed has been months. And there is Job describing himself as a man who works, does his job, looks for his wages, and dies. Remember that my life is a breath. My eye will never again see good. The eye of him who sees me will behold me no more. While your eyes are on me, I shall be gone. This talking about an eye and looking at him, is he talking to Eliphaz, or is he talking about God who sees him? Because the next part starts to begin to wonder if he's not thinking about an eye farther away than just Eliphaz's. When I say my bed will comfort me, my couch will ease my complaint. Isn't that always how you feel when you're sick? Oh, I just need a soft pillow. Oh, just let me get in my own bed. Oh, I just need to be in my own place. My bed will comfort me. My couch will ease my comfort. Then you scare me with dreams. I try to get a nice sleep on a comfortable place. And what happens? You scare me with dreams. Who's the you? Has to be God. Eliphaz is not scaring him with dreams. He is now talking to God. You're watching me. You're scaring me with dreams. You terrify me with visions so that I would choose strangling and death rather than my bones, which is how he's describing his body. It's just flesh, if that, and bones. That is a real picturesque phrase, isn't it? I would choose strangling rather than my bones. That's a man in rough shape. If I sin, what do I do to you, you watcher of mankind? Who's he talking to? He's talking to God. And Job is now beginning his why questions again. Why? Why? If it's not the law of causality, then what is going on that's causing this? If I sin, how does that hurt you, God? What have I done to you? If I do something wrong, I know that comes back on me. I didn't hurt you. So why have you made me your mark? Why have you chosen to do this to me? Why have I become a burden to you? Why do you not pardon my transgression and take away my iniquity, if that's what the problem is? Why? Why? And of course Job is asking the question why. Because he knows he's an innocent man. And this question haunts us and continually haunts us. Why do wicked things happen when people don't deserve them? Why? We're asking a question that is from the mind of God. The answer is only found in the mind of God. For now, I shall lie in the earth. You will seek me. God, you'll come looking for me. But I shall not be. This kind of almost sounds reminiscent of the child who threatens to run away from home. Did you do that when you were a kid? You're going to miss me when I'm gone. You know? It's going to be sad for you. You're going to miss me. That's what Job is saying. You're going to seek me. I'm going to die. You're going to miss me. I'm not going to be here. Job is in a rough spot. We've met Eliphaz, who gives him a piece of advice. He's got two more friends. Two more bits of advice. What do we glean from this little passage? Well, I've already tried to make clear that calamity and suffering is not always a direct result of sinful choices. That sometimes, yes, we reap what we sow. Yes, that is a principle of Scripture. But it doesn't necessarily mean that just because somebody has cancer, they've got sin in their life. That just because someone had a death in their family, that there's some sin in that person's life. That there's no way that you can know that, and there's no underlying theme of that. Is that a possibility? That's a possibility. But that's between them and God. That has nothing to do with you making the conclusion that you have every right to conclude that they were sinful people and that good people never have bad things happen to them. We must not live or serve the Lord with a belief like Eliphaz was trying to push Job into. Job, you need to get your life in order so that God will be happy with you. And if you would just have your devotions every day, if you will go to church on Sunday, if you will be a nice little person to everybody, if you stay in God's good books, God will always give you good things. The reason you love and serve God is because your life is happy and good. And conversely, the moment that you do something wrong, you can expect that God's going to respond and remind you, come back and love me and be nice to me. That is foolishness. That is not the reason we serve God. That is not the reason we follow Him. That is not the reason we love Him. That has nothing, we do none of this to try and win God's favor, to try and appease God. This is nothing more than living and thinking of God in some superstitious fashion, some superstitious way. God does not function on these pagan levels. There is no such thing as karma. Our God is in control of all things, even over wickedness and evil. Are there reasons that wickedness come into your life? Yes, sometimes those reasons are because of your own foolish choices, because of your own sinful choices. But it's not necessarily always the case, Eliphaz. Sometimes it is simply because God has chosen to allow a period of suffering into your life. God has allowed something to happen for His purposes, for His ends, for His glory, because this is the God that we worship and serve.